Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live chat. We missed last week, but we're back for this week. I hope everyone had a wonderful week, wonderful weekend. We have a lot to talk about. We have a heavy rainfall event on the way. We have the potential for a very active pattern and a backdoor cold front. And we have some tropical mischief on the way. And a couple of other things that we're going to be keeping an eye on. I want to talk also about the, I guess, called partnership with tomorrow.io. They approached me about doing some content for them. I thought it was a pretty cool opportunity. Nothing is changing with this service and everything else. That's totally separate. But if you're interested in additional content, more expansive for the Eastern United States and the tropics and some more unique discussions, definitely check that out. I hope you do. And I'll be sharing it on my feed and going from there. So there is that certainly. And let's see, make sure everything is live here properly. Should probably check that first. Okay, good. Okay, good. Everyone can see. Good. I always get nervous with that because I'm still, even though I've been doing this for almost a year now, I still get concerned that I didn't do something right with the video or the connection. So I'm always checking to make sure, hey, is everything working right? Yep. Okay. So we have a lot to talk about. So let's dive into it. And of course, I'll be taking your questions first on the premium side, premium consulting members, and then we'll drop by YouTube to see what's going on over there. So let's take a look at some data, shall we? There we go. Okay, well, the radar is awfully active this evening, is it not? With a lot of rainfall and some severe weather to the south of our warm front. When you're looking for severe weather, you're usually looking for right around the warm front, occasionally right by the cold front, but most of your most dynamic scenarios take place around a warm front or around a trough. So typically in these type of scenarios is where you get your severe thunderstorms. But before we start going over this threat, and we have a lot to go over, I wanted to go over the overall pattern because there's a couple of interesting little features that I'm noticing, a couple of themes that I'm noticing that really have my attention. So let's start off first with our driving parameters, which happens to be the tropics. And as we know, we have a La Nina. It has been weakening a little bit. Now, this La Nina, this third wave, what I've been doing the past couple of weeks, and premium members know this, is that I've been trying to look for what was the trigger to get us into the third wave. Because if you figure that out, then after that, you can figure out, okay, if that trigger falls apart, then La Nina falls apart, right? Cause and reaction, okay? That's basic physics. So what we have is that the IOD, which is out here in the Indian Ocean, okay, this area was well above normal throughout the spring. And really the late winter and early spring, well above normal. And that caused that warm water to expand into the Pacific Islands right here. Then the combination of that forced this La Nina to rebound. Remember, in February, La Nina was on the way to collapsing. It was pretty much heading towards neutral. There was even some model guidance suggesting maybe a weak El Nino, possibly for the summer. Although I didn't buy that, it was still showing up in the model guidance. And then everything flipped on a dime. Why? Well, because this feature out here was well above normal. And as a result, it forced our pressure, which is the SOI index, Southern Oscillation Index, to go strongly positive, which forced our air circulation, which reinvigorated our La Nina. And that's how we got our third wave, which is extremely rare. And this third wave, we've seen the IOD force a La Nina before. That's not unusual. But what's unusual is that we already had two La Ninas in succession, and the way this involved boom, we got our third. So that factor right there caused our third La Nina. Now it's weakening. Now this area is weakening, cooling because of various tropical systems and natural cooling of the water basin. So as a result, with this weakening, this forcing mechanism weakens, and so what you end up with is a weakening of our La Nina. Not a collapse, though. We know it's not a collapse because our SOI index is still supporting a moderate state. Now, we know that there's a weakening process going on because for the first time in several weeks, almost 3 months, we finally have a negative contribution. It didn't last long, but it was there. It's a signal. It's a signal that we'll see a weakening of our La Nina continuing. How much so? Basically, we'll end up with a weak La Nina by the time we end up in the summer, which I'm using a measurement of the SOI index because that gives us a true measure of the atmospheric relationship, which is what really all that matters, So the atmospheric relationship right now is a moderate La Nina. That's how the pattern is reacting. But as we head through the summer and head towards the early fall, we'll get more of a weak La Nina influence. How does that impact the tropical Atlantic? I'm not expecting any change in the forecast. I still expect a very active season. So we have the tropical forcing, and you can see in our MJO state, we are in phase 8 right now, which, by the way, keep an eye on the tropics. We'll talk about that in a moment. So we have a basin-wide La Nina, not really east or west base, it's basin-wide, that is gradually going to weaken. We have the MJO, as a result, focusing in on phases 7 and 8. Now, during the La Nina phases in the summer, okay, this is seasonal and SOI influence, okay? When you combine those two factors, the MJO in phases 6, 7, 8, and 1, and sometimes 2, typically supports an enhancement of tropical development, active pattern over the eastern United States, and volatile temperature regime. Your backdoor cold fronts, your strong cold fronts coming in from the Great Lakes, a surge of heat in between, what we've been experiencing. But when we have an MJO phase in 3, 4, and 5 especially, that is when we watch out for our heat waves. Now right now, at least all the way through early July, including July 4th, not really seeing a lot of support for heat waves in the tropical forcing. That doesn't mean we can't have a few hot and humid days. I'm not saying that. But in terms of sustained heat and heat waves for several days, that forcing parameter is really non-existent so far. I will say this, if there is going to be a hot and humid period, it's going to be focused towards southeastern Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia metro, and the southern suburbs, and then as you head down towards the southern mid-Atlantic, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Delaware, those locations. So that's what we're seeing here in the tropical forcing. Solar forcing. This is interesting. For the first time, we'll talk about this more in the long-range thoughts on Friday for the premium section, but for the first time this year, we had a blank sun for one day. It was only one day, but it happened. And already the sun's starting to fire back up with sunspots showing up all over again. So we got our 1. It's really rare to get 0, but we have happened a few times in the early to mid 2010s. So we finally got one day where we had a blank sun, no solar activity, but for the most part, the sun has been very active. And that's really important because it has led to massive destruction of our ozone. Why is that important? Well, it's because when you have the sun's activity destroying ozone, it cools the stratosphere. When the stratosphere cools, the 500 millibar patterns are able to expand. The heights are able to expand because the stratosphere is contracting. So what that leads to is more robust ridges and a higher potential for cutoff lows. What have we been seeing this spring and now into summer? Robust ridges, leading to some locations in the world producing droughts and famines, and robust upper level lows to counterbalance those above normal heights, which we have seen in the central and eastern United States and in northwestern Atlantic, and also around the Aleutian Islands and Gulf of Alaska. So what I'm showing you here are all the forcing mechanisms. Okay, so you have to understand the forcing mechanisms to understand what's happening here. And the cold stratospheric environment, that leads to a higher potential for instability in the atmosphere. Your thunderstorms able to grow. Your precipitable water values are maximized more, which leads to more torrential downpours. Keep that in mind when we talk about tomorrow. And all the factors align to enhance warm core low pressure system development and further enhances the influence of La Nina on the tropics, specifically the tropical Atlantic. So you see how everything's connected. Okay, everything is connected. Okay, so with that being the case, let's take a look at. I pulled up the right thing. Here we are. When I'm looking at the long range pattern here, I want to use the ensemble guidance because then I get a good mix of all the guidance and get a general pretty solid idea. And to be honest, the European ensemble guidance has been performing really well. WPC has been suggesting to use that primarily for our forecasting. So it's been very, very interesting to see this evolution keep on taking place. So I'm going to rotate through this. Watch the model guidance here. I'll zoom in here and expand this a little bit. I'm going to walk through and just think to yourself what type of theme is going on here in our forecast. Okay. It's marching on through. Swinging on through. Look at the same themes. Okay. So, I think you guys kind of see a theme here, right? Let's talk about it. So, for this weekend, we have an upper level low in southeast Canada. Now, what's interesting about this upper level low is that it's actually trending stronger with each day, and that's actually going to lead to better weather conditions for Saturday. Saturday originally looked like a complete washout with heavy rainfall, just a raw, ugly day. But now, because this is getting stronger, and honestly, this is kind of like a winter pattern almost, it's suppressing this trough that's moving through Virginia and suppressing the low pressure system associated with this trough. So originally this trough was a little bit further north with more of a negative tilt, but because this feature is getting stronger and stronger with each passing day, it acts as like a suppressant. And so it's forcing our low pressure system to track more towards the Virginia coast and suppressing our rainfall. So that's one note. That same trough shifts towards the Canadian Maritimes. Now, when you see this evolution take place here, this is when I was in Oswego, we did a lot of studying on this evolution. This is the perfect textbook signal for a very strong backdoor cold front. The trough introduces a polar air mass, which is further enhanced by the maritime air mass. You get a mixing of the two air masses, and then it shifts towards the Canadian Maritimes, and you see how this area here converges. See how the height lines are all converging? That convergence in the at 500 millibars causes the mass in the atmosphere to build up. And that mass cannot rise, it sinks. And so that sinking mass builds up heights at the surface, and that's what leads to your high pressure. High pressure is simply the increase of mass in the atmosphere in one location. So, as a result, you get the strong high pressure support around Maine, the Gulf of Maine, and that high pressure system support drives a maritime air mass, and thus a backdoor cold front, right into the northern mid-Atlantic. This ridge axis here supports warm air transport up from the Ohio River Valley, really from the Gulf Coast, the Central Plain, Mississippi River Valley, Ohio River Valley, Tennessee River Valley, and right into our backdoor cold front. So this is a textbook setup for a dynamic pain in the neck backdoor cold front that, if it sets up just right, could lead to one heck of a thermal gradient next week and just unsettled weather, periods of showers, depending on where it sets up. It's going to shift back and forth. It's going to be a mess. So we're definitely going to be watching out for that. Then let's go up to 10 days out. And notice we have this nice broad trough out here in the northwestern Atlantic. We have our western Atlantic ridge kind of split in half. And you have the heights building up in the plains. Looks like a nice heat wave over the central plains and the Mississippi River Valley. And you have the evolution setting up for day 10 through 15, which takes us to the latter parts of June, of a weakness on the East Coast. Keep that in mind for the next thing I'm going to show you. You see this out here? This tropical wave out here? It has my attention. The reason why it has my attention is that this feature already has a nice, robust, low-level circulation, especially around 850 millibars down to the surface. I don't expect any type of rapid development around the Cape Verde Islands, which are right here. But this is going to fester and march its way across the Atlantic. Now, when you see this feature right here, this is the intertropical convergence zone. You see this feature right here? This is vertical wind shear. This is too far south still. So as this wave comes on through, it's going to interact with this shear, some cooler waters, which, let me show you that signal out here. See how the waters are below normal? This is typical of a negative AMO. So this feature right here, this environment right here, should I say, this combined with the shear is not going to be supportive for any type of rapid development. But once this pesky wave gets to the Western Caribbean, then it'll have potential. Then it'll have potential to develop. And that takes about 10 days. What have I been seeing in the model guidance heading out to that point? Well, we're starting to see more and more of a cluster of something trying to develop around the Western Caribbean, basically where our last Tropical Storm Alex, has started to develop. Now, this doesn't mean we should jump the gun in terms of impacts or anything like that nature, but it is suggesting the potential for this low pressure system to lift northward. Now, depending on how it evolves, notice we have low pressure systems here and low pressure systems here. Let's walk back and take a look at our setup here during that same time period. And what do we have? We have a high pressure system, we have weakness here, and you have a high pressure system here. So depending on where this development takes place, it can either curl up and head towards this weakness, which means a lot of moisture transport up the East Coast towards the middle and end of June, most of the end of June, somewhere around the 20th through the 25th. Or it gets caught under this ridge, festers over the Bay of Campeche, lifts up towards Mexico and Texas, and produces a mess on the Texas coast. My point is that we're going to have to keep an eye on this evolution. So that's the overall environment we have. That is the tropical environment that we're dealing with. Right now, no immediate development, but something to watch out in about 10 days or so. And then we have this mess approaching. Now, notice the trend here. See this short wave right here? See how it's kind of curly cool right here? Notice the forcing here. It looks like it's lifting towards the northeast. And when we take a look at the winds, notice the strongest winds are focusing a little bit, orientating a little bit to the north of the New York City metro, certainly north of the Philadelphia metro. And we're also seeing that at 850 millibars. There's our upper level lows starting to form at 850 millibars, kind of a dual low right now, but certainly aligning, setting up to the north of the New York City metro. We're seeing the best lifting and dynamics heading towards the eastern Great Lakes. And our trough is more of a neutral tilt rather than a negative tilt. You could even make a bit of a case that the long-range trough is more of a positive tilt, and this shortwave trough here is a negative tilt, and you're kind of having competing factors here. But we also have a lot of tropical moisture surging northward, getting ready to lift and get driven northward. So when I look at this environment, and I look at the water vapor satellite picture here, I'm seeing a very, very vigorous system, a very impressive shortwave. And that shortwave is going to be tracking towards, and you could watch it move, towards the Hudson River Valley. So I like the idea of your strongest lifting here, moderate lifting in the New York City Metro and Boston here, and weak lifting here. But when I say here, I mean the Philadelphia Metro. But with all the moisture in the atmosphere and with a unstable atmosphere developing, in fact, let's take a look at the mid-levels instability here. And it's clearly present. I'm not worried about the low-level instability because this is happening early in the morning. So I'm not really watching that as a factor because typically you lose that low-level instability as we continue on through the evening. But you see the lifting index potential as this shortwave approaches and that tropical air mass tries to surge northward. So you have the factors in place to support a very heavy rainfall event. So let me swing on here, pull this up, and pull up 500 millibar PVA, our vertical velocity. And the European guidance, along with a whole host of mesoscale model guidance, is now suggesting your strongest lifting, which matches up with the observation, to the north of the region. But we have enough strong PVA here early in the morning, again, this is from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m., to support a robust area of heavy rainfall to swing through the region. So I'm using the HRR guidance, but the NAM model guidance 18Z finally started to agree with the HRR. You could also use some of the GFS, ARWS guidance. All of that is starting to agree on what we're about to look at right now, which is developing convection. This is all because our warm front's lifting northward. Our tropical air mass is pushing northward. And again, your strongest lifting, your most widespread rainfall. This is a nice vigorous line of convection, thunderstorms, and heavy rainfall. Most likely frequent lightning, some strong wind gusts. Wouldn't be surprised if we get a severe thunderstorm or two out of this. But this is happening from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. So by about 6 a.m., you're pretty much out of the woods in Philadelphia. Let's go to 7 a.m. From 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., you still have impacts in New York City. You can see that through southern New England. This type of environment, with the observations we're seeing, would support a wave of rainfall and embedded thunderstorms capable of very heavy downpours. Do not be surprised if we get some frequent flooding out of this, some urban flooding, some road closures right at the start of rush hour, visibility below a mile, and some strong wind gusts. Wouldn't be surprised if we get a power outage or two out of this. A very vigorous short wave, as we can see on the water vapor satellite picture, with some very heavy rainfall, and your precipitable water values in this scenario. Let's pull that up real fast right here. In this scenario, you're getting easily between 1.5 to 2 inches, with some locations pushing up to 2.15, even possibly 2.24 inches. That there sets up your environment to support intense heavy downpours, tropical downpours, downburst wind gusts, possibly pushing over 50 miles per hour. So very nasty conditions tomorrow morning for tomorrow morning's rush hour. The good news is that this clears out pretty quickly. And by tomorrow afternoon, dry air builds in, humidity falls off, and tomorrow afternoon and Friday, Friday most of the day, looks absolutely beautiful. And then for Saturday, remember what I was talking about with that suppression? And it looks like our low pressure system is going to get suppressed to the south with just a few passing showers on Saturday. And it's not going to be completely dry, but it's not going to be a washout either. And then Sunday, it looks to be absolutely beautiful. So if you have weekend plans, there we go. So that pretty much covers everything I've been keeping an eye on and watching for. So now I'm going to go back and go over some of our questions here. We start off first with the premium live chat, and then I'll drop by YouTube and check out what you got there. And we got a couple of questions already, so definitely check that out. So let's see here. Got a couple of questions from Card Shark. Did you see today's solar activity update? Remarkable, even if it's short-lived. I'm assuming you're talking about the blank sun period. It's short, but it was impressive. I don't know what to make of the solar activity. I'm very much in a wait and see. I don't want to jump the gun and saying grand solar minimum, no grand solar minimum. But keeping an eye on the data. We're in new territory when it comes to solar science and how the sun impacts the Earth from a variety of different factors and impacts. And it's never wise when you're dealing with a unique new environment, especially with the sun that we still know so little about, to jump to conclusions. But man, is it fascinating. So a lot of my forecasting involving with the sun and its impacts on the atmosphere are literally fresh theories based on the latest research and data and some of my own thoughts. Saying, okay, if this is how the atmosphere is working and we're seeing this interaction, maybe this is what's going to happen with the atmosphere and the pattern overall, and it's due to this forcing mechanism, which makes sense based on what we're seeing in the observations. Let's see if it works out. Brand new. This is truly the golden age of meteorology, in my opinion, because we have access to all the data we want. I don't need to be in some fancy laboratory or get like a grant. It's right on the internet, right here. We're watching it right now. And we're looking at it, we can formalize our theories and test them, and we could share them with other doctors and other scientists, and it's exciting. When I was a teenager, I would dream about being able to get model data. So some of you guys who are teenagers or even weather enthusiasts in your 20s, 30s, and 40s understand we're living in the golden age, because now you can get that data at your fingertips. And I'm not talking about looking at a random app and just looking at the latest HRR forecast or RAP forecast. I'm talking about doing real data analysis and real forecasting and real diving into all the research. And it's all available. So it's really exciting and really something cool. It looks like La Nina, while basin-wide, is gaining more of an east-based aspect again. This is only temporary. Let me show you this. This region right here is Nino 1+2. Always be very, very wary of 1+2 because it's the most shallow area of the El Nino Southern Oscillation region. And because it's so shallow compared to the other areas, it tends to have a huge fluctuation. So when I'm looking for a theory, when I'm looking for a basin orientation, I want to look at Nino 3, 3.4, and 4, and where that orientation is setting up. 1+2 could act as an enhancement, but I don't like to use it as a directional bellwether because it's far too fluctual. It has far too many fluctuations, and it tends to vary quite a bit. Easily next week we could see that area being above normal just by the interaction with storms. Do you expect this pattern to persist through most of the summer? Yeah. Now we'll see breaks. We will get our hot and humid weather periods, and the tropical Atlantic is going to be a huge wild card. But this overall theme, yes, I do expect it to persist throughout much of the summer, possibly into the fall. What can be expected heading down to AC Friday early afternoon, and then down there Friday night, Saturday, Sunday? Okay, well, Friday's going to be beautiful. Sunday's going to be beautiful. Saturday, periods of showers. Not a washout, but a real a pest. And definitely below normal temperatures. Not exactly the best weather conditions for beach weather or laying out for a tan, but if you just want to enjoy the weather, Friday and Sunday look absolutely beautiful. Rob Allen asks, Stephen, based on your long-range thoughts, you have mentioned that La Nina seems to be weakening. With the southeast ridge not building in as much, does that allow tropical cyclones to escape east and not right up the coast? A lot of that depends on the orientation of the western Atlantic ridge. I want to be careful here because I don't see the southeast ridge collapsing or anything of that nature. I'm just watching, and you know what, let me pull this up here. Okay. So, you still have your ridge out here. And you have your ridge axis out here. And you keep on getting this weakness here. Now, this weakness is not a collapse of the ridge. It's more like indentation, okay? And it's still transporting tropical air masses. Believe me, my parents keep telling me. In the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, it is humid out there, okay? Which is typical for the summer. But what this trough is doing is counteracting the above normal heights here and here. 10 days out, you still got an indication of a ridge out here. 15 days out, weakness here, ridge. This is one large ridge overall, but a separation, a weakness here. This weakness, depending on how it aligns, could either allow a tropical system to escape out or get drawn right onto the coast. I don't know yet. We have to wait and see how each tropical system interacts with the polar troughs that are going to swing on through and the timing of those features. Because sometimes it could act like a goalie and kick it right out in the Atlantic, and sometimes it could entrain it right up into the East Coast. So don't know yet. So I wouldn't make any conclusions or make any statements one way or the other on that just yet. Let's see here. The ability to collect data because of tech advances has been big as well. Satellite data as well as space probes and telescopes really give us so much more information than even 10 years ago. Yeah, and we haven't seen anything yet. Just wait. That is definitely more stuff on the way. I was actually looking at much more. Nino 4 seems to be shrinking. Nino 4 has been fluctuating a little bit. Let me go back to that data here real fast. Here we are. Nino 4 has been fluctuating, and it has to do more with the subsurface. Your coldest subsurface areas are actually under 3.4 and 3. And Nino 4 has been fluctuating, which is kind of normal during a weakening La Nina. I wouldn't go east base on this. I would seriously go basin wide because I'm seeing too much fluctuation from one range to the other. So the forcing mechanism is that of a basin wide La Nina. At least that's my opinion. Wouldn't the stronger trough and upper level lows in the northern Atlantic and Canada help amplify the western Atlantic ridge? In theory, depending on the orientation and the interaction between the two features and what's coming in from the west. But yes, that is an idea. That is why I think that we're going to see a pretty robust backdoor cold front, by the way. And the latest data from 12Z really produces an enhanced boundary here for next week. The end of next week is just going to be unsettled. I would not be surprised if Connecticut is sunny and cool. New York City is cloudy and rainy. And Philadelphia is humid and stormy, with temperatures ranging from the mid 60s in Connecticut to the lower 90s in Philadelphia. Yeah, it's going to be one of those forecasts that's going to make me lose a few more hairs. And believe me, I'm already running out. So, not exactly happy about that. It's going to be a tough forecast. Let's take a look at what's going on YouTube. We have a couple of questions here. Let's read. What time do you expect thunderstorms for central New Jersey? Oh, that's Dylan Ehrman, of course. The man loves his thunderstorms, that's for sure. You're going to have to get up early in the morning, let's say 4 or 5 a.m., for those thunderstorms, and then they'll be swinging on through all the way through 7 a.m. Yeah, that's true. The weather actually acts like a alarm clock for you. What is the potential for severe weather? Severe weather threat is low, but still possible. Let's see. Is it earlier than usual for tropical development coming from that area? That's a great question from Judy Lomax. I hope I pronounced that last name correct. Tropical waves, no. If we saw actual development around Cape Verde, it would be very early, but I'm not expecting that. But this is basically a signal of a egg, so to speak. Okay, it's a potential that's out there that we're going to have to track across the Atlantic. I don't expect any development until it gets to the Western Caribbean, but it's certainly an impressive wave for this time of year over Africa, which certainly has my attention, because when we do start moving into a more favorable time period in a couple of weeks, those waves are going to be very interesting to watch. But also at the same time, during a negative AMO period, which again is this feature right here, when you see this cool water like a horseshoe right here, this is called a negative AMO. And when you have a negative AMO like this, what happens is that you get these tropical systems that aren't able to intensify as rapidly until they get to the Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and Western Atlantic. Why? Well, look, that's where all our warm water is. So that leads to an impressive rapid development of tropical low pressure systems. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that type of forecast. The potential for dry air, vertical wind shear, development of the low-level circulation. In fact, with Alex, it was supposed to develop into a robust tropical storm before it reached Florida. That didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Because there was just enough vertical wind shear at 850 millibars to 500 millibars to prevent organization of the low-level circulation. Thus, it wasn't designated a tropical storm until it got to the Bahamas. Not that it mattered much, because when you have precipitable water values over 3 inches and a lot of rainfall being squeezed out as a result, producing 10 inches, whether it's named or not, it's still producing flooding, which is why being able to issue a potential tropical cyclones advisory from the National Weather Service helps a lot, because you don't necessarily need a name, but now you have people's attention on the potential impacts. So that's really cool. This past weekend was a great example of why adding a PTC advisory is really key. What is the dynamics for heavy rainfall for tonight? We already went over that. Let's see here. Good evening, Garden. Is there any heat wave coming up? I don't see anything sustained in the guidance. I don't see any tropical forcing right now, like an MJO phase that would support it. Nothing that really stands out. Now, again, this doesn't mean we can't have a few hot and humid days. And if you're looking for heat wave conditions, which is 90 degrees plus for 3 days straight, your best potential is southeastern Pennsylvania, southern Philadelphia, southwestern New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. That's where you want to go. Huh? Yeah, in our apartment. Yeah, exactly. Because our apartment literally is a greenhouse effect built in, as it retains heat even when it's 70 degrees out. In fact, we don't even need to turn the heat on in the winter because it retains that much heat. I don't know. It's no, not much. We save a lot of money in that respect, but still, it's crazy in here. How was Texas? Texas was fun. Um, I will say this: Texas, Texans like to put peppers on everything. Everything. Ice cream, water, it doesn't matter. They love peppers. I am allergic to peppers. I do not work well with peppers. If I do not, I had to specifically say no peppers on anything. And they looked at me like I had three heads. I don't know. But you do not need to put peppers on pizza, for example. I mean, you could, but you don't need to. Especially not jalapeno peppers. So I had a big problem with their cuisine, although the barbecue was beautiful. I'll be heading out there again in a couple of weeks for some other factors. Huh? Oh, yeah, Whataburger. That was a disappointment. That was a major disappointment. I was like, this is overrated. Sorry. Let's see. Is there any activity in Western Pacific, or is that tropical-wise? You know what? I did not check that, but if I'm looking for new storm data, I like to check out Tropical Tidbits. They do a great job of collecting a lot of data. So let's see if there's anything. Well, we have one invest that we're keeping an eye on in the Central Pacific, but nothing really that stands out. No major storms or anything of that nature. I didn't think so. I mean, normally I check it out, I see something that keeps my attention, but nothing really stood out. I want to pull up this data. This is really interesting. When we have a positive AMO, okay, that's when a more warm phase in the Atlantic, we typically end up with a lot of 30-degree water. Notice this summer, a lot of our warmest waters are out here in the Pacific and barely any in the Atlantic. This is interesting. Typically, what you want to look for is above 27 degrees Celsius for your tropical Atlantic activity. And right now, and again, this could change, but right now, no 30 degrees Celsius water at all throughout the entire Atlantic. Why is this important? Potential fuel. The warmer the waters are in the tropical Atlantic or in the tropics in general, the higher potential for these tropical low pressure systems to feed on that energy like it's nitroglycerin and rapidly intensify. Not really seeing that in the Atlantic. Now that doesn't mean you can't have a very active season, but this would suggest that your potential for rapid intensification because of well above normal water is limited. I will point out, though, although there are some scientists out there who I disagree with, stating that the Gulf Stream is weakening or any of that stuff, it is alive and well. It's shown no sign whatsoever of weakening. It is very much robust. So anyone hoping for that, sorry, dude, it's not showing up in the actual observations, despite what the model guidance that you're using is saying. They're just using an indication of that. Compare that to what we're having here in the Pacific, where we have multiple areas, 30, 31 degrees Celsius. This is some very warm water. And let me tell you, when we get a tropical low pressure system developing out here, and it's able to maximize these water temperatures, don't be surprised we get a couple of Category 5 typhoons out here heading up towards Japan. Something to just keep an eye on. And remember, when you get a typhoon curving up in this area, that leads to a trough in the eastern United States and typically a rather robust storm in about 10 days or so. Let's see here. Let's see. Just checking out, see some more stuff. Judy, you're welcome. Up using TV and stick to sun clouds. Love the video chat where I can ask a meteorologist questions. I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Absolutely. There's a lot of features that have been added on to YouTube. They got like this sticker thing, and you can show your support and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And thank you again for definitely jumping on, especially during the spring and summer. I kind of expect a low volume of people coming in to join the chat. Um, Mostly because I just don't expect. I mean, thunderstorm passes through, who cares? But during the winter, I mean, that's when this place is like rocking, like 2, 3, 400 people. It's insane. Even former teachers and whatnot come out of the woodworks. So it's usually pretty fun. But I do appreciate you guys coming out during the summer and checking out my thoughts, joining with me. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm getting the same question again. What is the dynamics for heavy rainfall threat for tonight? There is plenty of moisture in the atmosphere that's lifting northward. You got this vigorous shortwave approaching. So you got strong lifting combined with precipitable water values rising above 1.5 inches. That leads to the threat for intense heavy rainfall. So when you have precipitable water values over 1.5 inches and strong cold air transport driving into that, that leads to a line of intense convection, which is what we're seeing here in the model, guys. In fact, here, let me see if we got new. This is the latest HRR guidance. And you can see the evolution here for tomorrow morning. Now, I think the primary impacts tomorrow morning is going to be basically tropical downpours setting up for tomorrow morning, not necessarily severe weather or powerful wind gusts and stuff like that. I think the heavy rainfall and poor visibility will be the worst impacts out of this scenario tomorrow. And no, this is not a tornado threat. Let's see if we got any more questions out of the premium chat here. But we've gotten some great questions tonight. I really do appreciate it. So we got about 13 minutes left. And so if you have any questions about anything, let me know. Drop it in there and we will go over it. In the meantime, let's take a look at the latest radar. Let me refresh this. And this is from WeatherTap. It's a provider. I know I get this question a lot. Like, where do you get the radar data from? I get it from WeatherTap. I've been using it since 1999. Okay, that's a long time. And it's a trusted source I really like because it's usually very reliable data for me to collect. And this scenario is really interesting. Now, like as the forecast has gone through, we've seen this stationary front here, and you have your warm front here. Now, why isn't this a scenario for tornadoes? Well, let's take a look at the wind shear. Your bulk wind shear is all clearly focused to the south here. Now, as the short wave lifts northward, we should see an increase in vertical wind shear, but it's going to weaken as it's lifting through the northern mid-Atlantic. So, typically what I look for in a tornado outbreak in the northern mid-Atlantic. This is specifically for the northern mid-Atlantic. Remember, we have a natural environment that usually argues against tornadic thunderstorms. We have a orographic environment that normally argues against tornadic thunderstorms. So what you need is maximize instability, maximize vertical wind shear, maximize frontal structure. We don't have that in this scenario. What we have is an environment of maximize moisture content, which is starting to evade, and strong lifting from this short wave. And you can see the divergence here setting up. So the combination of those factors leads to this being more of a heavy rainfall event with some embedded severe thunderstorms rather than a severe thunderstorm event with tornadic potential. This is not the right environment for that. That isn't to say you shouldn't keep an eye on things as a meteorologist. That's why we issue warnings and whatnot. But if I was looking for an environment for tornadic potential, this would not be it. What I'd want to do is have this warm front already north of us, like let's say right around here, and I'd want this low pressure system to track through New Jersey, not well north of New Jersey. So you'd want the low pressure system to track here towards, let's say, Trenton through New York City. That leads to vertical wind shear enhancement over central and southern New Jersey, maybe the Lehigh Valley and portions of southeastern Pennsylvania right in here. And that would lead to your severe thunderstorm and tornadic potential. But this is not something that I would look for. Now, for areas off to the west here, yeah, there is definitely an environment. You have a warm front potential, you have cyclonic circulation, you have the ability to maximize your instability in the atmosphere. So yes, it makes sense further west, further south and west, which we are seeing very, very nicely. In fact, let's see here. I believe, yeah. Let me zoom out. And there is our tornado watch. Now notice that tornado watch lines up perfectly with our warm front passage. And that warm front passage is setting up at this time the ability to continue to maximize instability, continue to maximize vertical wind shear, everything you would look for. So this is an environment that would set up, and that's why the SPC, which is something else you can use to analyze your threat here. Okay, so you can look at this to take a look at where your threat potential is. And as you can see, the SPC overnight really doesn't highlight much of a threat for us. If anything, it might be some downburst wind gusts over southern New Jersey. Now, I never like to go with this in terms of being a copy and paste, so to speak, but let's face it, these guys, their whole job is to analyze severe thunderstorm potential. So I'll use them and read them to see what their thoughts are, but I don't use them to say, okay, it's going to be this, so therefore I must forecast that. But they do a great job at analyzing the data out there and the observations, and it's a good thing. A meteorologist always checks other AFDs and other sources of information, other forecasts of thoughts, because you never are able to think of everything. There's always something that you might have missed. So this science will humble you, okay? If you're a young meteorologist and you're learning, you want to learn how to get involved and learn how to forecast or get into atmospheric science, much like baseball, which is probably why I love baseball, this science will humble you in ways that you cannot even dream of. And you learn pretty quickly it's a good idea to read other people's thoughts and to take in other people's points of view. And really, you should do this for everything in life, because there might be a perspective that you might have missed, or a feature that you might have missed, or maybe you're not seeing it properly for whatever reason. It happens. And much like baseball, a forecaster will have some streaks where they go on and have a lot of winning streaks, a lot of good forecasting. But at the same time, you can have a slump, and you have the faster way to get out of that slump, a forecasting slump, is to read other thoughts and include that. Okay, look, cable. Cable? Calib. Okay. All right. Well, all right. Let me put it to you this way. Tomorrow morning, you're going to be woken up by a lot of heavy rain and some rumbles of thunder. This is not, I repeat, not a tornadic threat. Not. It is a heavy rainfall threat. It is a strong wind threat. It is not a tornadic threat. Okay? I don't know what else I can say. Pretty much all I could say. And that also bears out with all the model guides that we have. Okay? There is no signature whatsoever in any of the models for a tornadic event. Heavy rainfall? Absolutely. Sounding like it's a freight train of heavy rain moving through your town tomorrow morning? Absolutely. Tornadic threat? No. Let's see here. Let's see. Do you see any potential for convection in New York City overnight and tomorrow to be suppressed by convection further north and west? I see what you're saying. Okay. So, one of the things I'm watching for, you see this area right here? Okay. See this area right here? You see how it's kind of curling up here? This is going to be heading up towards here. Now, there's some guidance, specifically the NAM guidance, that really enhances this because of this shortwave right here. And so the idea here is that this shortwave heads this way, supports such strong enhancement of the heavy rainfall that it reduces the rainfall around New York City and points south. Not really seeing that indication for locations south of us, but I think towards the Catskills, if we see that enhancement, and let me show you what the NAM is trying to do here, because it actually shows this really well. Here's the 12Z. And you see this enhancement right here? It basically kills everything to the south. The reason why is because you have rapidly rising air and you have to have a counterbalance of sinking air. So what happens is that you end up with this scenario here tomorrow morning. Other mesoscale models are against that idea. It does not make this area as strong, and so it does not create as strong of a subsidence zone. But the 18Z guidance that came out is not as robust. So I think that it's going to trend more towards the HRR guidance. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you again for joining. I really, really appreciate it. Of course, I love the fact that you guys come out here and we do this live chat every week. We try to every week. So I really appreciate it, and just thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, and as always, stay safe out there.